Welcome to a Wonder Junkie podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson.
Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows. Nobody has the faintest idea. The best guesses are lies. You may be sure of it.
Hello, Carrie. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you virtually. I've been listening to you for quite some time, and I just find your ability to communicate this subject matter of mitochondrial health and quantum biology, I find it to be really well done. A lot of people communicate it, but it's not so easily accessible, and it's hard to get people to understand it. So I feel like you're doing such a good job, and your website is a fantastic resource. And so I'm just happy to share your knowledge and wisdom and essence with other people today. So.
Well, thank you so much for saying it. These are topics that I absolutely love sharing about. So I'm happy that there's an audience that wants to learn.
Yeah, I think it's an increasing number of people that are finding this to be a paradigm shift in their perspectives and in their behavior. And that's what's happened to me. But I'd love to just share with the audience. I know your story quite a bit now, but I'd love to just share a little bit of your background with folks. And then we can get into some of the light, water, magnetism, and help people find some of the practical shifts they can make.
Yeah, absolutely. As most people who kind of maybe seek alternative means to support their health, for me, it was my own health journey, and then nothing working, right? So about 13 years ago now, I had my first child, and I expected some fatigue, but I didn't expect the fatigue, the insomnia, the digestive issues, the pain. And so a lot of things happened that really my body just started to feel like it was shutting down. And, at the time I thought I was armed with all the tools I would need to support it. So I had a conventional undergraduate degree in biology. And then I had an advanced degree in clinical nutrition. I went to massage therapy school, so I had a more traditional Chinese medicine view of the body. I had certifications as a trainer, breath work, all things fitness related, posture, and not one thing I did move the needle, right? The way I wanted to. I thought could set up the perfect diet or the perfect supplement protocol. And it's like, am I feeling better? Maybe, I don't know. And it just, I wasn't ready to call it quits, right? It's like, oh, you're a new mom now. That's all there is. So just deal with it. And so I was up one night scrolling on my phone because I had this deep knowing that there was something so fundamental about human health that I was missing. And I found a blog post from Dr. Cruz mentioning circadian rhythm. And I recognized that this was something that I had no awareness of. And it really actually also vibed with my understanding of the organ clocks in traditional Chinese medicine. And so taking nothing at face value, I just started to dive deep, read as much of the research as I could get my hands on, read books that then led me to water and led me to mitochondria and nature. And now here I am, right? And now I have constructed a couple of, I teach this, right, to help people heal, because I started to apply just a couple of key strategies, and it moved the needle so far in 3 days that I was hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, there's something so profound about this that we just don't know. And now I view it as we're returning the body back into what the human body needs, right? We're just basically restoring the environment of the human, and the body then has this innate wisdom and knows how to heal from there. And that's how I came to this. And it's just been so profound for me, and I love teaching about it.
I love it. And I love that the way you teach it is so cool because you make it very practical and easy to understand. And you help people to realize that it's not so complex, even though it is. It's a huge and deep dive. But I love the practical elements of it that you tell people about that are mostly free. And it's about getting back into nature. And so in my journey, I'm trying to just make simple adjustments and add these simple things into your life little by little without getting obsessed with it. And I've heard you talk a lot about fear and how people can get obsessive and how that actually counteracts the whole thing in itself. And in my journey, I've also noticed just so many people, especially in this self-help movement where they go from workshop to workshop, and you could call them biohackers, if you will. And I respect it, but I've also seen it to where it becomes its own self-obsession and it becomes its own dis-ease. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that first so that people can feel a little bit of relief from the get-go when they're taking on this journey, because it can be overwhelming and it can be obsessive, and it doesn't have to be. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on that and just share that from the beginning so that people don't feel like it's overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, I want people to realize that what this has done for me and my health and the health of all the people who I've observed is it's simplified things. It's made things easier. It's given people more space. And what I mean by that is more space to maybe do other things or just to be, it's not always about doing. And I came to this through now a mom of three, right? Working mom of three, my husband's a beautiful contributor to the household as well. But I'm busy. And so I don't have all day to bask in the sunlight or to take 3-hour walks in nature. And so I think my practical strategies with this just came because it's like, well, I got 20 minutes. Well, I got 2 minutes. Like, do I notice a difference? And so I want people to know that when you're dealing with this stuff, like those little 2% steps or 2% changes and shifts, they actually start to add up over time. And so that's why I highly encourage someone, if you hear something in this podcast that interests you and resonates with you and you want to try it. Just try that one. Stick with it for a little while. Observe your body and then say, okay, this is how I feel. Maybe now I want to try that. Okay, try that now. And those over time, I look back on my health journey and even in this through the lens of this quantum health stuff, I've probably changed 50 significant things that I do on a daily basis, but it doesn't feel like it because it's so little tiny steps over time. Whereas if I were to give you 50 steps right now, Ryan, to be like, here you go, here's your protocol, here's your plan, do it. That's just going to be setting people up for failure. So I want people to know that when you find the thing that you resonate with in this conversation and try it out, and then come back and listen to again and try out something else and that will definitely take you towards your thriving state of health. You don't have to do it all at once, and it does not have to be perfect.
I love that so much. I think that's the part of the reason why I really wanted you on, is because even on your website, you start off in these little chunks and you give people the beginning phase where they can begin. And that's what I want, is I want to share it with my mother and with my captain at work and people that just want to find the basics. And I think it starts with the paradigm shift of why. And so we can get into understanding. Let's start with like light, and we'll get into water and then magnetism, and we'll go through the phases just to give people like the prerequisites of why they would even think about this stuff like morning sunlight. And because now it's become my obsession, is if I have to go choose to work out in the morning and it's in an indoor environment with all these false lit rooms, I've made all these paradigm shifts in my mind because I've listened to hundreds of hours now of all this stuff. And it's like, okay, it makes sense, but why did I choose to take a morning walk instead of go work out in the gym first if I only had to choose between two options? And just triaging and finding those simple paradigm shifts. And, I've been lucky to have Gerald Pollack and Scott Zimmerman and all these cool people that are so good at communicating, but you seem to do it even better when it comes to like relatability. So anyway, let's start with the paradigm shifts. What would you want people to start really shifting first?
Sure. I start everyone off with understanding light and applying light. And I also tie in what I call mindset with that. And we've already alluded to it. The body can't heal in fear. The body can't heal when it thinks that it can't get better, right? And so there is a mindset piece that we don't have to talk about that right now, because light truly is what we would call the quantum biology foundation. And so 13 years ago, I never thought about light any differently than, can I see what's around me or can I not see what's around me? The type of light didn't matter. And when I started to learn that light held information in the form of the different colors that were built into it, and that actually informed my body of different processes, that's when my world just opened up. And so the way that I like people to understand this is, we've all seen light through a rainbow or a prism. And we've seen it split into the different colors of the rainbow. So there's all the colors of the rainbow. And then there's portions that we cannot see with our eyes, humans cannot see, called infrared, which would be above the red, and ultraviolet, below the violet. And that wavelength range of light right there, when it comes from nature, when it comes from the sun, and I'm not talking about it having to be a sunny day, right? It could be cloudy, rainy, foggy, snowy. But when the sky starts to illuminate in the morning, whether it's behind a cloud or not, we start to get a different blend of colors, a ratio and blend of colors coming at us. And that shifts and changes until solar noon. And then it goes back in the reverse order until sunset. And those shifting and changing of colors is information. And the primary thing it is it sets something called our circadian rhythm. It tells our body what time of day it is. Because all of my organs are looking to have, they have this optimum window of time where they need to work hard and make a lot of energy. And it would make no sense for them to work hard 24 hours a day, right? That would drive up a lot of damage. There'd be no time for repair. In the same way that plants will expend a lot of energy to face the sun, they'll bend to face the sun. And then when the sun goes down, they'll wilt. And then as the sun comes back up, they'll expend that energy again. We're doing the same things inside each and every single cell of our bodies. We want to know what time of day it is. So every cell in each of the different organs understands how active it needs to be, how much energy it needs to have, what hormones it should be secreting, what enzymes need to be operational, what proteins need to be operational. And the beautiful thing about light from nature, from the sun, is that the wavelength range that allowed us to tell time was the blue portion, because that blue portion is very low at sunrise and increases predictably until the sun's at the high point in the sky, and then starts to go away until there's no blue in campfire. There's no blue from sunset onward. And so we could easily tell time of day if we had a sensor for that, and our eyes do. Our eyes are sensors of that. And so from there, then, Ryan, the concept would be that there's this clock in the brain receiving that blue. So that the backs of the eyes have these little sensors called melanopsin receptors. They're firing and saying, there's this much blue, there's this much blue, there's this much blue. And that firing is communicating to a clock in my brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which literally vibrates and oscillates and communicates with every cell in my body what time of day it is based on what my eyes are perceiving. And on my health journey, I know for a fact that I had spent at least a decade not paying any attention to syncing my eyes up with the changing blue that's happening in natural light, and never honoring also the darkness that we need to experience at night. So I had a very, very confused circadian rhythm, and then all the downstream ramifications were the symptoms that I experienced.
It's amazing. Yeah. And light is such a deep story. And I've gotten to hear even the first one with like Dr. Jack Kruse and Huberman, that 7-hour 2-part series where he goes deep, deep into it. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is such a huge story of mitochondria. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what is mitochondria. A lot of people hear the word and it's becoming, a pop term almost. But you do a good job describing like what it is and how light affects it. And then we'll get into water as well, of course, because that's a deep subject. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about mitochondria. And then also, I think we missed a little bit about like I have Scott's Nira lighting on me. And so when I am indoors, which is rare now, I'm so lucky to have like a very opportunistic life to be outside all the time, which is a blessing. But most people don't. And so I'm like, if you're in a hospital or you're in a school or you're stuck inside, let's talk a little bit about what they can do too in part of this light conversation.
Yeah, well, let's go there first because that does tie in nicely. And to then talk to them about the mitochondria. So what I'm going to tell you is that when you look at, as I alluded to, light in a rainbow, you see this beautiful blend of all the different colors. If we were to analyze most modern LED lighting, it wouldn't look like that rainbow. It would look like a very sharp peak of blue. And then kind of a little bit of around like a little hump around orange, yellow, orangish in there, and that's just a foreign effect. And that really big dominant blue that signals to my brain it's the middle of the day, and it's lacking in the red and the near infrared. And the mitochondria want to bathe in that red and near infrared light to optimize their efficiency, which we'll talk about what they produce for us. It's so powerful. And so what people can do is people can either have a source, if they can, in their office of like what you're using with Scott's technologies, or that have red and near infrared, or they could even shine red and near infrared light on their body prior to going to work, which is the work of Dr. Glenn Jeffrey, who's a phenomenal researcher working with Scott too on a lot of things. And he's shown that if you apply red and near infrared light to the body before you go into an environment that may be harmful to the mitochondria, you essentially have a fortifying effect. And in some instances, it appears to be a quite robust fortifying effect based on the research that I'm seeing. And so there's things we can do, right? And then throughout the day, it's take little light breaks. So even my factory workers, you eat your lunch outside, even if it's in your car with your window down in the winter. You take your quote unquote smoke breaks, which I'm putting in quotes, right? Because I don't want you to smoke, but you take your smoke breaks outside, get that natural light signaling. And in those instances, people can maintain beautiful circadian signaling with just a couple of little supports right there.
I love that. Yeah, and I actually was lucky. I talked to Glenn Jeffrey on this podcast, and he does a great job just breaking down all the scientific studies they've done with like blue light on mice and the effects of it. And Scott helped me to realize too that it's not like blue light is bad. A lot of their conversations now out on the web are like, just buy these glasses because you got to block the blue. But he helped me to see like, no, it's about spectrums and getting more of it in a more natural cycle, right? And
Right.
so that piece there was helpful for me to be like not afraid of blue light, but more like let's just start thinking about getting the full spectrum as often as possible throughout your day at the right times.
Well, exactly. So these are, what I'm wearing, people are watching, is I'm wearing a yellow pair of blue blockers because I don't have an open window. I'm in front of a computer, right? Like I find that my eyes, I've tried it with and without these, and my eyes and my energy, my mood, my focus work really well with yellow here. But that's when I'm literally sitting in front of this computer, sadly today, for 4 hours. It's a
Mm,
long time. So I certainly did a walk this morning when I'm driving, dropping the kids off at school. I got the windows open, our windows or sunroof open, at least right now with it being so cold. But if I'm just going to go, let's say I'm just going to run a quick errand, I'm not going to freak out. Right. I'm not gonna go make sure I like really, I got to protect everything when I go go to the grocery store real quick. So it's funny. I almost feel like Clark Kent in my community because people will see me like this this is how I am. This is how I present myself because I'm in this type of a lighting environment. And then when they
mm-hmm.
see me out and about, it's like, well, where's your glasses? It's like, well, I don't need them because I've just checked in with natural light on my way to the grocery store. I'm
Yeah.
spending, I don't know, 20-30 minutes in the grocery store, and now I'm going to check
Yeah.
in with natural light after I leave the grocery store again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole thing about it. It's like it's about those little check-ins that keep like Scott was saying, like the check-ins that really keep the body on track with time of
Mm,
day. And so it really makes a huge difference. And so it's not about having the perfect lighting environment. It's
yeah.
about really giving your body the correct exposures. Red sunrise and sunset should be much more dominant in the red and infrared, right? Whereas middle of the afternoon, it's going to have more aggressive blue outside. There is, and that's not a bad thing. It's just when it
Yeah.
comes with the beautiful blend and spectrum that you get from nature, your body has all of the information it needs in order to optimize its function.
I love it. And then again, not to freak out every time you get obsessive, that creates its own stressor and people can
Totally.
become obsessed like that. And I even found myself doing that in the beginning, but I'm like, look, dude, just get on the rooftop when you can for sunrise. But sometimes it's worth it to miss a sunrise if you have to do something that's maybe valuable or more important, or maybe you had to stay up late to go see an amazing concert. It's like just
Right.
try your best to add these things into your life when you can. And then a lot of it's just about letting go and having a good freaking time because I'll always go back to this with people that are obsessive because I love just trying to communicate the practical things too that people can benefit from. And there was a guy that was 112 when he died. He was like been through World War II, the Great Depression. I think when he was interviewed, he was 108, and they asked him like, "What did you do for your health and how did you do it?" And he was so cool. He's like, "I ate Campbell's soup every day. I drank whiskey every day. I had coffee every day, and I was happy." And I'll never forget that because I've always in my core felt that your mind is so powerful. And we're going to get into the ether and the morphic fields and gratitude and all that because at the core, I think your relationship to your experience in this life is the foundation of your existence. Like if we have any will at all, how are you showing up? Is it great with gratefulness or gratitude and appreciation, or is it like skeptical and worried and I need to hurry up and find what's missing? And I like to start first with like, man, I should be appreciative of the fact that I'm alive and awake and aware and I have a life and there's all this cool tech around me and I'm not worried about the 5G towers. I'm more grateful for the fact that I'm alive in this time where we have tech and we can go places and fly planes and learn and talk to people from across the world. And that actually can trump anything with your dis-ease profile. And I really want to hammer that in because it's so important. I've heard you do it too. And I think when you get into the self-help movement, it's another one of those things where it becomes its own dis-ease thing. People are just too obsessed. I'm like, look at that guy who was 112, who was happy. And he went through the hardest times in human history. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up again because it's
Yeah.
so important.
It is so important, and you're exactly right about it. Which is why people want to know, like, what's the perfect place to live. Like, now that I'm learning about this circadian health and nature, like, do I have to move? And it's like, no, the perfect place is where you're going to be happiest, where you're going to want to go outside and enjoy your time, and so it has very little to do with, like, there is this one perfect location that everyone needs to live, and you will live to 150 if you live there. It's like, no, you hit the nail on the head. It's gratitude over your latitude, and it's just enjoying your time outside when you do get it.
I love that. Yeah, that's very cool. Let's go into mitochondria and like
Yeah.
what are they for people and how do they relate to light and with water? And let's start getting into that for people because I love this stuff.
Yeah, sure. So mitochondria are little tiny, what are called organelles in our cells, which are things that just perform work. They perform a function inside of our cells. And our cells have hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of them, depending on how much energy that cell needs to produce. And so the mitochondria are responsible for essentially taking charge in the form of electrons and protons and converting it into water and ATP, which work together to be the energy currency of the cell. And, essentially, because there's a hypothesis that these mitochondria used to be their own bacterial species, and that over evolution, we essentially acquired them. And then they essentially provided us with a unique form of energy production for us, and we gave them shelter. But because they were their own bacterial population, they were actually at one point had to be sentient and aware and responsive to their environment. So they're exquisitely aware of the environment inside the body, inside the cell, going on around the body. And one of the main things that I believe they're truly aware of is the circadian rhythm, our shifting and fluctuating circadian rhythm, and the wavelengths of electromagnetic energy around us, which are not just non-native, right? We're talking about things like even the magnetic field of our heart. And so, and in response to the information they're getting, in response to the time of day, they're going to change how much water and ATP they make. In response to different lighting environments, they're going to change how much water and ATP they make. So essentially, let's say the start of the day, my digestive tract will start to need more energy because my likelihood of encountering food will go up from over the period of darkness I just experienced. And so my pancreas is going to get the signal to say, okay, start of the day, let's be prepared to make insulin. Digestive enzymes, hey, stomach, get ready to make acid. And the mitochondria, who give the energy for those tasks, will start to increase its production. And then so by doing so all day long, the body is essentially trying to tell the time of day. Each of the organs knows when it needs to be most operational versus like a period of darkness when the various organs need to restore and recover. And that way we can allow our body to essentially optimize all of its functions through the mitochondrial energy production based on perceived time of day.
Mm. Yeah, it's a very cool and complex little subject. And I love hearing the way you talk about our bodies as like little water batteries and how we're basically unplugged if we're not doing the right things. And so let's go into a little bit of mitochondria in relationship to water and easy water, which is Pollock's work, and
Yeah.
help people to see that piece because it's so important.
Yeah, I love this. So this was actually the talk that I gave at Jerry's water conference this past fall, and I think it really ties in because when we think of water in the body, the vast majority of us think that it's the water that we drink, and it turns out that our mitochondria make about a half a liter of water and recycle gallons of water for us every single day. And so we really have to recognize that perhaps the main form of hydration we have inside of our bodies is the water that the mitochondria make and recycle. And those mitochondria make and recycle water differently depending on the light that it's exposed to. So as I'm sure Glenn was talking about, when the mitochondria are exposed to red and near infrared light, they become much more efficient at making water and ATP. Those wavelengths of light actually get preferentially absorbed by the step in the mitochondrial electron transport chain where water is made. And so we really, that really shows me that the mitochondria are designed to be bathed in those frequencies all day long, those wavelengths all day long, to optimize their water production, which makes sense because we have plentiful red and infrared light from sunrise all the way throughout the day till sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Blue is partly blue will actually start to inhibit mitochondrial activity, mitochondrial function. It'll inhibit water production at cytochrome C oxidase step 4. I always say, like, why would nature do this? Why would we have a wavelength that would inhibit it? Well, at the height of the day, when the sun's at the high point in the sky and blue is most dominant, we would likely be bathing our bodies in light, which actually can be a form of energy. It will be charging up the water we have, which I'm going to talk about in relation to Dr. Pollack's work. Well, we would have been in continuous contact with the earth. We wouldn't be wearing shoes that divorce us from Earth's negative charge. So that helps us to maintain this beautiful negatively charged water inside of us. And so perhaps the mitochondria didn't need to function so actively during that time of the afternoon, when we could have gotten our energy and maintained our water and our hydration and our charge in different ways. And so the way to kind of like view this is, okay, well, what is she talking about with this charge? Well, the water that is produced by the mitochondria does not stay in its liquid state. It's produced as a liquid. But as soon as it comes into contact with any biological surfaces inside of the cell, it will reorganize itself into what Jerry Pollack calls easy water or exclusion zone water. And that water takes on much more of a gel-like consistency. When it takes on that exclusion zone format, it gives the water unique properties, which is why Jerry calls it a fourth phase of water, because it acts very differently from a liquid. And one of the main properties that I like to highlight in terms of human health is all of a sudden that water, when it's in its easy format, is negatively charged. And that negative charge is synonymous with cellular health. Like, this is not controversial. People have heard of this in different ways. Maybe they've heard of membrane potential, or they've heard of like voltage across the membrane, or they've heard of having an alkaline pH, right? That's another way to say electron rich or negatively charged. So having a cell that has adequate negative charge inside of it is synonymous with health. And as that cell drains of that negative charge, it starts to become dysfunctional to the point where it actually can become cancerous. So the water was never given the attribute of, maybe water is responsible for this negative charge, because no one ever looked at it any different than neutral liquid water in a glass until Jerry came along. Well, Gilbert Ling before him as well, and Albert St. George as well. Let's give everyone credit, right? Who said there's something about the water inside of the cell that it has a different structure to it, and it actually is negatively charged. So could the water and the negative charge of this structured, easy water be the source of health and vitality of the cell? And as a clinician, I've been blessed to be able to experiment with this and help people to say, well, we know all these things support the exclusion zone water. We know all these things support the mitochondria and their ability to make this water. Does that translate into a better health outcome? And it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And so it means that the water that the mitochondria make that becomes structured into this exclusion zone water, that then we know that exclusion zone water, as I'm sure Jerry said, gets charged by infrared energies, again, which are always present from the sun. That whole system is what maintains the health and the vitality of the cell, and therefore the health and vitality of the organ. And if there are kind of little kinks in the chain where maybe we're not around the infrared enough, or the mitochondria aren't efficient at making the water, or we are consuming things or being around things that drain that exclusion zone, that's when we start to have dis-ease ensue. But that's also why it doesn't matter where in the body someone is experiencing dis-ease, the application is the same, right? We're going to get the person back into the appropriate, practical tools, practical steps, so that they can support their mitochondria and their exclusion zone water, and the body will know where that's needed, and that will heal itself.
I love it. We can go so much deeper on this, and I know you're passionate about talking about the water piece, which I love because you care, and it's like you found this huge missing link, and when you discover this, it's a big deal. And I think the big piece for people to just start making in their mind, which is pretty simple shift, is that we are nature. We're not separate from nature, and we've disconnected our minds and bodies from nature with our evolution of our tech and our buildings and all this, but it's just about remembering, like, for all of human history up until this little last few 150 years at most, we've been in nature, barefoot, running around in the sun, going to sleep at a certain time. And so it's really about thinking like us as little, interconnected beings with the planet again. It's not that big of a shift, but it sort of is a big shift. It's a paradigm shift. So,
Well, it needs, again, like you're saying, this isn't rocket science per se. This isn't something that hasn't been practiced in ancient civilizations for millennia, right? But the modern human needs a scientific reason. That's because right now we're very left brained, and so science is our language of needing to understand. And so that's kind of what I feel like I'm doing. I'm bridging that gap to give people the science about why we are nature and how it can be that simple as reconnecting with nature in key ways. And then the body just inherently knows what to do, because that is how we've evolved. We've evolved to be one with nature. And so it's not about a strict, rigid protocol. It's not about, it's not about a ton of supplements, right? Like, to me, really, it is as simple as getting the body back into its natural environment and letting the innate intelligence of the body do its thing.
cool. Let's talk about some of the practical ways you can get the easy water more, where it's happening, because he was saying like sauna and cold and things like this, and then the sun. And
Is
it's
he
just like,
saying
what are the,
cold now?
who's saying that?
Is Jerry saying cold now in his presentation?
Maybe not him, but I know
Oh,
other
okay.
people have just
I was
started
gonna
to bring
say,
up the
come on.
fact that I don't think Jerry did. No,
Okay,
he's
okay.
pretty strict with his stuff, but just cold. Even like I loved long ago, I got into like Wim Hof stuff, and I'm like, God, it's
Sure.
so practical thinking about the fact that we're always perfect environment. We don't want to be
Mhm.
cold, so we put on a hoodie. Now I'm like, no, it's cold this morning. I'm going to go out with my shirt off, get some sun, and be
Yeah.
cold. And when it's
Yeah.
cold, you shiver. That's good. And when it's hot,
Yeah.
you sweat. And getting okay with the uncomfortability instead of adjusting thermostats and trying to put on layers. It's like, oh, that's
Yep.
so dumb. I went my whole life thinking I should be comfortable. And so, anyway, I like the practical things, and I do have a sauna and a cold plunge, and I'm very blessed for that. But for people, what can they do to get easy water? And what are ways in which easy water affects dis-ease, like cancer? And like if you do have cancer, or if you want to prevent cancer, what are ways people can really mitigate that?
Sure. First and foremost, this is never medical advice. It's just
Right.
information. So make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you are aware of that. This is just information that I want you to dive deeper into. Um, well, let's talk about first. We can talk about cancer, and we can talk about all of the, like, the quote unquote different disease states there are, and how easy water is impactful. But when I say easy water, people are always like, "Well, where do I get it? What do I drink?" Right? And it's
Right.
like, you can drink negatively charged water. You absolutely can, and that can be beneficial. But what I'm talking about here are what is supporting the mitochondria's ability to make water, and what is supporting the water that we already have inside of us. So step one is a source of infrared, because Jerry's work showed that when the exclusion zone was drained or diminished, like, and I liken it to a water battery. So when our water battery is drained, when you shine infrared light on it, it charges up threefold or more. And so, and that's just synonymous with greater negative charge, greater vitality, energetic capacity of the cell. So what could those sources of infrared be? Well, they could be coming from natural light, right? Natural light will always have it. It could be coming from a sauna. It could be coming from a hot bath. It could be coming from a hot shower. It can be coming from cuddling and sharing infrared with your significant other, with your pet. It could be coming from getting cold, because when people get cold, their body has to heat back up. And one of the ways that people's bodies do that is their mitochondria make more heat for them, make more infrared. We can exercise, right, as a means of increasing the infrared in our body and charging back up. So what I find so fascinating, and I think I'm hearing this from you too, Ryan, but correct me if I'm wrong, is it's really cool when you see all these different proposed health modalities where you'd say exercise, sauna, sunlight, hot baths, hot springs, intimate, sharing an intimate space with someone, cuddling your pet, right? All of those things have been proven to have health benefits. And my hypothesis is the health benefit is because they all work to enhance exclusion zone water levels in the body. And when you do that, the body regains that essential healthy negative charge it needs to run efficiently, to run optimally. So for me, it's not, again, it's not perfect. I'll ask the client, what infrared are you exposed to? And when I say, okay, infrared, like heat, what infrared, what heat source are you exposed to? we can always find something. We can always find
Mm-hmm.
something. And I want them to apply it regularly. Now, for some people, what's fascinating is that can heat really charges that exclusion zone water up. And so too much heat for some people can actually start to make them feel sick. Because in a cell that has been drained of its exclusion zone, it's called exclusion zone because the way it structures itself prevents things from penetrating it, literally, right? Nothing will penetrate it except you could essentially added electrons can flow through it, and light. It can act as an antenna essentially for light and frequency. And so if for someone, if the heat component is building exclusion zone too quickly and pushing toxins that were inside of the cell out, and the body has to process it, that can feel uncomfortable. So that might not be someone's modality. Jerry has also shown that grounding and earthing, can do the same thing. So maybe I will have a client do earthing or grounding as a means that does typically feel gentler as a means of supporting exclusion zone water levels. For other people as well, his work has shown that some very traditional adaptogens, such as Tulsi or holy basil, have the ability to support it. So I might have some clients who can't do the heat, but they'll be doing the earthing or the grounding, and they'll be drinking holy basil tea. So, I mean, there's a lot of cool means where you can adapt this, and there's no one right way. I just want people to be aware of the fact that exclusion zone water is a thing. And we want to have strategies that we sprinkle in throughout the course of our day and or week that directly supports that exclusion zone water that we already have. And then secondarily, we know that the mitochondria are making this water. So we want to then do things that support the mitochondria and their ability to continue to make this water for us. And that comes twofold. And again, no fear here, right? This is not about fear. But there are things in modern living that can harm the mitochondria's ability to make that water. And those would be things like excessive exposure to non-native EMFs. It would be things like heavy metals, glyphosate, right? Fluoride, certain toxins. And so take inventory. Where might you be exposed to those things, and what can you do to slowly and gradually minimize your exposure or just reduce your current exposure? I'm not in a zero EMF environment, but I know because I spend a large, significant amount of time on my computer, I hardwire everything, right? So everything is hardwired because I know that that's going to mitigate the electromagnetic field exposure. I found out years ago that we had fluoride in our water and that there were toxins in the tap water. So I started to filter it. And so these are just gradual steps that you can take to support your mitochondria, to kind of avoid the things that are really particularly harmful to them. And then, so then we say, well, what's beneficial for the mitochondria? Well, the mitochondria love natural light, right? So let's get outside in natural light. They love red and near infrared light. So that might be someone who does a red light therapy panel, wants to invest in red light therapy. Mitochondria love when we're moving, right? When we move and do exercise, we need to make more mitochondria, new mitochondria. Mitochondria like to be able to regenerate when we're sleeping. So I tell people to not eat right up till bedtime because we want mitochondria to be able to kind of break themselves down and recycle themselves if they're no longer serving the tissue. It's called mitophagy, which is similar to autophagy. And so if we kind of then say, okay, are we doing things that support the mitochondrial water production and mitochondrial health throughout the course of a week, or the course of a day, depending on how someone wants to look at their time scale, then yeah, if you're doing, then great. And I've seen it so many times slowly layered in, and someone will layer it in and observe, and then they'll layer something in and observe. And it works. And so again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, what resonates with you here? What intrigues you? What do you want to try? That's what you should start with.
I appreciate that very much because as you're going, it's like you're in this field and there's people listening that are very much familiar with a lot of this stuff. But then if someone were to come across it for the first time, and I was trying to help Dr. Jack Cruz understand this about the nature of, say, MK Ultra or something really weird and deep. But for the people that are in that little world, it's like, okay, you've taken in all the prerequisites and it becomes normalized. But if you go and just start spewing it off to the average person that's never heard of it, it's unrelatable. And I like that you meet people where they're at. And it's like, just start small. Do a little thing, add a little better thing. Okay, I learned this. Maybe I'll buy some blue blockers for at night if I'm watching TV or something, or if I'm going to go see a movie. Or it doesn't have to be overwhelming. And I like that you sort of spoon feed people with all the little options, and they can pick and choose little by little. And I'm one to do that too. And so I like to triage and see what works best most first. So I'll tell people, like, just get out. Like I told my dad, just go out in the morning if you can, when you can, and catch the sunrise and sit outside and just sort of gaze that direction and just be out there. What a simple shift, and what a good way to wake up, you know? And I
Yeah,
like to sit on the grass in the morning or go for a walk, then sit on the grass, and I'll do breath work because that's changing your blood chemistry. You're focused on being grateful. So there's this whole collaborative effect of like catching the sunrise. That's my morning ritual, is sunrise breath with my feet on the grass. And it's
in
so
gratitude.
simple. But
Yeah, I love it.
what a start. It's like that to me is like the ultimate resolution for 98% of what we're talking about. And then you can
Yeah.
go about your day with a good start. But
You're
yeah.
100% right. It's so funny. I love hearing people's morning routines once they've kind of gotten into this enough to understand how to apply certain strategies. Mine is exactly the same. Sunrise, grounding, gratitude. I have a slightly different, it's slightly different breathwork practice, but a breathwork hold practice,
Hmm.
setting an intention, right? Like you said, and that, if I get that in, and I try to do it, and sometimes it's only 3 minutes sometimes, Ryan, right? Because things are
That's
busy.
awesome.
But if
Yeah.
I can get it in, if I get it in, it's like, okay, I've done so much for my body. It's like just in that little chunk of time right there, it just feels like such a beneficial way to start the day. So it's cool to hear
Hmm.
other people and their routines. I love your morning routine.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, like, you're willing to go and not be outside right now to share this information and to be on a screen. It's worth the risk to you because you also find that serving others and helping others is actually, I think it creates easy water and all the stuff you're talking about too. You
Absolutely.
know, simple things like that where you're like, you have meaning and purpose, and those are elements that you can't really measure scientifically sometimes, yet at least. But I'd
Right.
love to talk a little bit about melanin and light inside the body. That was a part that
Sure.
really blew my mind when I heard Dr. Jack talking about that with Huberman.
Yeah, sure. We have melanin in two places, right? We have it externally, as you can see, with different varying concentrations of melanin in the skin or in the eyes, the hair. We also have melanin inside of our body, and you know, no, it was people knew about it, I guess, potentially because of Parkinson's disease. But we've got melanin in way more areas, way more cells than just the substantia nigra. And so the research here is Arturo Solis Herrera. He spent about 30 years studying melanin and recognized that melanin, it's dark because it absorbs, right? It absorbs. What is it absorbing? Well, one of the really cool things that it absorbs is it absorbs light. And when it absorbs light, that light helps to not only maintain the melanin itself, but then splits water. Because remember, water is everywhere. Water is around that melanin in our skin. Water is around that melanin that's deeper inside of us. And so melanin, when it absorbs light, water gets split, and that water becomes molecular hydrogen, molecular oxygen.
Mm,
And what Dr. Solis Herrera has found is that there are some parts of the body that do not rely on the oxygen from the air that we breathe, and in fact rely on the oxygen that's being produced simply from melanin splitting water. There are
mm,
areas of the body that are not relying on the breaking down glucose and sending that glucose to the mitochondria to eventually make water and ATP, but are using the energy, the electrons and the protons and hydrogen, that molecular hydrogen. And so the eyes, for example, are an area where that's happening quite a bit. And so then how can we maintain that internal melanin? Well, cold, right? Cold causes our body inside to make more light. We'll
mm,
make both light in the form of infrared, but we'll also make light in the form of ultraviolet light that our mitochondria are always making. It's called biophotons. And so if we're producing adequate biophotons inside of our body, we're maintaining that melanin, and then that melanin is splitting the water, and it's just a continuous source of energy for us. And we can also get it through the skin, right? So that's why I
mhm.
encourage people to develop an adaptation to their local sunlight starting in early spring onward, because if you can tolerate that light on the skin more and more, especially the stronger wavelengths of light that you're going to get in the later parts of the day, or middle of the afternoon, and then later on in the summer, you have the potential to harness so much energy from light alone and light's impact through melanin and water.
Mm. Yeah, let's go a little further into that. So, sunscreen and the whole war on sun, I feel like that's happening in the industry, the centralized industry. It's like, don't, wear sunglasses, wear sunscreen. I've completely stopped wearing sunglasses myself because I'm not that sensitive to light. And I want to take these are prescriptions, so I take them off as much as possible anytime I'm outside and I don't need them. And let's talk a little bit about ways to harness natural light and how that really does trump everything if you can. It seems from what I'm gathering from all these different folks is like, get that morning sun and get as much natural exposure to light as you can. And there's just so much inside of this that we can go into, I feel like, for the behavior shift part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest hurdles that people have to overcome is, like you said, that fear that we've been taught of the sun. Like the sun is out to get us. The sun is going to cause cancer. The sun's going to hurt you. And before I started understanding this and then, experimenting with applying light to my body in different ways, I was the same as you. I would wear sunglasses when I was outside. My eyes were much more sensitive to the light. They're not sensitive anymore. I got like these really light blue eyes that, I was just like, oh, I can't be outside. My eyes need protection. And then anytime I was outside with sunlight on my skin for extended periods of time, I would burn. And what I started to realize was the sun wasn't out to get me, that we need to sync if there's really strong sunlight striking my skin, so strong ultraviolet light striking my skin, my eyes need to perceive that and communicate that to my brain as well. So there's this entire communication system that has to be intact. Eyes seeing the UV, which we have sensors for UV light in the eyes, that gets communicated to parts of the brain that control melanogenesis, for example, or tanning. And so
Mm.
if we can have all of those synced up, the brain says, the eyes say ultraviolet light, the skin says ultraviolet light, the brain says, let's layer in the types of endogenous adaptations we need to tolerate this intensity of light. One of those is more melanin. One of those is making something called urocanic acid in the skin. And then eventually, if we've received an aggressive amount of sun that the body can't handle anymore, we'll get a pinkening. It's called an erythema response. It's not a sunburn, at least not
Mm.
yet, right? And that pinkening of the skin is saying, okay, that's all the sun that you can tolerate for this one session. Pull yourself in the shade. Put a cover up on, put a hat on. And when we allow that process to develop from springtime onward, it all syncs up. And we start to,
Mhm.
I don't burn. Like I develop a beautiful tan. I never used to be a tan. I didn't think I could tan, right? I have a very light skin type, so I didn't think I could tan. And I've heard other people, same thing. The coolest part about kind of being on social media and having a medium-sized following, would be that people tell you their stories. And anytime I post about sunlight in this capacity, I'll have people say, well, I tried that out and I actually started tanning too. Or I had some woman who said, oh yeah, I was wearing sunglasses my whole life and I never thought I could ever tan. And now all of a sudden all I do is take my sunglasses off and I start to tan again. It's like, I know, right? I know.
Mm.
It's just, we have to be aware that this is a thing and stop fearing the sun, applying it smartly and in a way that our skin and our body can adapt to. And then by the time summer rolls around, I don't know about you, but by the time summer rolls around, my skin is like well tolerant to the increasing ultraviolet light, and it just
Mhm.
craves it, just loves it. And then I can soak up the necessary light for vitamin D production, because a lot of people think that's the only benefit we get from sunlight on the skin is vitamin D, and that couldn't be further from the truth. But that is one important thing that we do need to make through sunlight, because of all the metabolites you make when you make it through the skin, as opposed to just taking it from a supplement. So got to
Mm.
kind of reframe this idea of fearing the sun and it's out to get us, and instead choose to strategically apply the sun so that your body can start to reap the benefits.
I love it. Yeah, I've made it such a part of my life now to try to think of myself as a giant solar collector and even my eyes as being the first priority. And it's like amazing how little I do burn and how often I don't wear a shirt anymore because I'm like, I have to get out there in the sun as like a little bit of it's my best friend type thing. So I'll try and do all my workouts, all my walk, everything I can do to be outside, and I'll tolerate as much sun as I could imagine. I used to burn a lot too, and I think it was because I was wearing sunscreen, I was wearing sunglasses, and I never would have thought that paradigm shift would have happened. I just didn't know it existed. So I tell people like you should consider it. That's why I wanted you here, because someone with all the ability to articulate it. It's like just click on the link, and I can almost package a huge file of information for people, and then it leads you to a website. And it's like that's all we're doing is trying to put things into formation, and you've done that so well, and it's just nice for people because it's an important subject. There was a piece. Oh, hydration. When you said it would split the cell and melanin works in that way, it leads to thinking about. I know so many people now that carry around that big jug of water all day long and they're just slamming water, but they're always peeing and their pee is clear. And I think people have a hydration issue. And I'm doing my best in my life to add the right minerals and electrolytes. And I feel like I don't have to drink nearly as much water. And let's talk a little bit about this piece with light and how it affects hydration and volume and all those things.
Absolutely. So you're right. I've had a lot of clients come to me where they're drinking maybe reverse osmosis water or tap water or distilled water even. And they show me, it's like, well, I'm drinking, 3 of these a day and I'm, peeing every 30 minutes. I've got symptoms like I'm dry, my skin's dry, my hair's dry. And to that I say, maybe that's not the water that your body wants to absorb. And the water that we drink, it does matter. But step one, the water that we drink gets absorbed into our blood. That's where it goes first. It hydrates what I call it hydrates our blood volume, right? We want a very healthy blood volume hydration. After our blood volume is hydrated, then at that point, some of that water, if there's excess, will trickle out of the capillaries and bathe the space between the cells, called the interstitial fluid. And then if there's adequate hydration in the interstitial fluid, it'll pull some into the cell if it's needed. Now, people who are drinking, step one is usually it's not getting absorbed into their bloodstream effectively. And that's because the reverse osmosis and the distilled water, it lacks minerals. And no minerals in let's say natural spring water, that's not a main source of our minerals throughout the day, but it provides charge for the water. And that allows the water to be better absorbed into the blood. The blood actually mimics the ocean, right? The blood is a very mineral rich entity. And so it would make sense that if we're just drinking pure water, the blood volume wouldn't want that because it wouldn't have the adequate mineral status to essentially buffer all that hydration. So we just flush it out through the kidneys. It's why when someone goes to the hospital and they're dehydrated, they're actually given, a 0.9% saline, right? They're not just water, that's got some salt in it as well. And so if someone is peeing all the time, make sure that you're drinking what I would call filtered water, get the toxins out, add the minerals in, which can be as simple as ocean-based like sea salt essentially, or ocean-based minerals or a full spectrum mineral to taste even, I tell people. And I find that the people who want it quote unquote saltier are the ones whose bodies actually need those minerals more. Maybe they've got low blood pressure, have dysautonomia or something along those lines. And so it's a fascinating thing. So they'll do that. And then if they can structure the water, which sounds woo as heck, and we'll have to come back together to do an entire podcast right on structured water. But water holds information, and the body will want to take in good quality information. And so if you can do something, even just a prayer or gratitude before you drink the water, that essentially imparts high quality information into the water that then the body recognizes and can pull in. So when people do those things to their water, they filter it, they remineralize it, they structure it, they need to drink way less. And those things also that we're talking about throughout this podcast, we're doing things that help them maintain that intracellular hydration anyways, like the infrared exposures, and doing the things that help the mitochondria become much more efficient at making water as well. And so we're not as reliant on the water that we drink. And instead, it's kind of a broad view of hydration. It's not just drinking gallons and gallons of ultra purified water all day.
I love it. Yeah, and then starting with the fact that you even have access to water, clean water, where most of the planet doesn't. Be grateful for the fact that you live in a time where the water's just available. Man, that trumps everything again, and that really transcends a lot of the stuff we get into, which I love about what you're saying. And then thinking about the mitochondrial effects of how much water's already within you and the effects of what you can do by creating that easy water, and the effects of the little things we've talked about, getting more natural sun, and how much you can do, even if you're drinking just, stripped water that's been filtered. I would imagine if you started getting outside more and all the natural things we talked about, it would trump just drinking water and not doing those things, or
Exactly.
adding the best water or trying to focus too much on water. But I like that you sort of break it down in little bits. And the water subject's just so deep. So for people, we can put in the show notes maybe some of the other resources, and I'll send them to your link and stuff. But
Okay.
gosh, I know we only have a little bit left. let's see, we have 7 minutes or so left. I want to be sure to extract as much as I can out of you while you're here. What are some of your favorite resources for people to start with for this subject? What do you think? Is it your website?
Yeah. Or, I direct people to Instagram too. I put little bite-sized stuff there. If someone's on Instagram, the way, also podcast interviews, I think are fun, right? So this podcast interview, or if there's a subject that you're interested in, I've done chats on all of this stuff and deep dives too, and on all these different things. And so I think that repetition, just hearing this type of stuff over and over and over again, that's actually helpful for the way I learn, in terms of when I first when I first heard like Jerry Pollack's work, for example. Listening to his podcast were very helpful. Then I went to read his book. Okay, that was another layer. And so I just encourage you to just engage with this information in any way you can. I have some blogs on my website. I've got these courses where I really do try to break this down as much as possible. And you know me, Ryan. You know me. I'm going to throw the science in there because I just have to. But I do try to make it accessible and practical at the same time. And so, again, I think any of those, from my Instagram to my YouTube, read some blog posts, listen to more podcasts, those sorts of things.
Yeah. I think your website's truly awesome too, because it just gives you a nice stepping phase to dip into this. But
Thank you.
And you do have an event this summer. Do you want to tell people a little bit about that?
I would love to. Yes, I would love to. An in-person retreat. It's our Return to Nature 2025 retreat in just south of Nashville, June 26th and 27th. There's nothing like it's good. So I'll be there speaking. My co-host Oksana, who's been in this space as well, will be speaking. Sarah Pugh, Sarah Kleiner, Stephen Hussey, Danielle Hamilton, someone who I'm so excited as well, named Peter Forehand, who is new on the scene and talks about ether crystallizing into matter. I mean, really cool stuff. And so, yes, there's going to be some beautiful speakers, like a really interesting speaker lineup, but there's nothing like getting together with other people who love this information, because I'm not sure how much in-person stuff you've done, Ryan. I mean, I just started doing it again because my kids are now a little bit older over the course of the past 2 years. And my heart is just so full after, yes, I learned stuff. It's interesting listening to the presentations. That's beautiful. But the conversations in between and just sharing the energy together, the experiential stuff. So we also have a lot of experiential things as well, from breath work to meditation, sound bathing, to just being able to explore. We found a beautiful circadian friendly environment. It's 160 acres on a reclaimed rock quarry. So nature abounds there. Natural light in the conference room, which for me is huge, right?
That's
right.
amazing.
And so, I'm just so excited because I walk away from events like that just so amazingly fulfilled in multiple ways, mentally, physically, spiritually. It's just such a fun experience. I'm excited to share that with other people.
It sounds incredible. And I do agree. Like when you can do that and you can vibe with people that are, into the same subject matters, it really fills you up. And so that's some of the best thing in life, is community and just sharing and connecting, because otherwise you're alienated. We can get into this stuff, but if you're not on a podcast or something, you're almost like, no one's paying attention to any of this. I'm a little bit of a weirdo. And so it's nice to come together with the other weirdos and to start sharing this stuff.
Totally. Exactly. You're exactly right.
That's great. One thing I like to ask everyone is, if you were going to die today, this was the last thing you could share and your website wasn't available and you hadn't had all the other podcasts to refer people to, what would you want to say to the world?
Nothing. It's actually not what we talked about, but it's love and oneness and compassion. And again, that's a whole podcast in and of itself. But we are bodies of water. We're bodies of water that are continuously connected to other bodies of water on this planet. That's been shown time and again, to other forms of creation on this planet. And what supports all of that, me, you, the environment, all the bodies of water, is love. And so I really think if we can live in our hearts and through compassion, it does so much. So.
Oh, that's perfect. Man, you're awesome. It was so nice to talk to you, and I really do appreciate your time, and I look forward to connecting with you more in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. I really enjoyed this.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you for listening to the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes, and rate the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
what we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.